What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Talkin' Huskers. And today I am joined with my good friend Rajeev from the Bucky Report and Locked On Badgers. Rajeev, I appreciate you hopping on here with me to break down the battle for bowl eligibility and what is probably going to be an ugly game. But I appreciate you joining me on here. And do you want to go ahead and tell the people where they can find you and what you got going on in your channel?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Justin. Always a pleasure to join you. Yeah, I'm the co-host of the Bucky Report. That's Bucky Report on YouTube, Twitter, wherever you can get your podcasts. And then I'm a regular contributor on Locked On Badgers. We actually just did a preview show on the Bucky Report yesterday in advance of the Nebraska game. Also talked about our offensive coordinator stuff and a couple other things, but don't think you'll be happy with the predictions that we made. But you can. We actually used some information that we got from Justin. So yeah, excited about the weekend. And this is always a big game. Obviously, the results haven't always been the way that Nebraska fans would like them to be, but we're pretty happy about them. So hopefully we can get it done again.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's kind of this interesting dynamic where it seems like, Wisconsin fans kind of started out the season in disarray. And it seemed like, middle way through the season, there was, some things kind of put together, some changes made offensively after Tyler Van Dyke went down. So I guess I'll just open it with that. What are some of the changes that were made midway through the season? I know it was kind of more of an emphasis on balance, running the ball, especially. But what are some of the things that you think Wisconsin has done well over the last few weeks that they can bring into this game that can help them be successful against Nebraska?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting season. We obviously had Tyler Van Dyke, as you mentioned. We lost him in the Alabama game to a torn ACL. Hopefully, maybe he comes back next year. But Braden Locke is our backup quarterback, and he played a little bit last year too when Tanner Mordecai left with an injury. So he was somewhat experienced, but it's just been a bit of a slow regression for him, sadly, in the last few weeks. We really just haven't seen that. But the one thing that's gotten better is our running attack. At the beginning of the season, we had a multitude of running backs. We had Ches Malusi, we had Tawi Walker, we had Cade Yakimelli, and we've got Darian Dupree. And Luke Fickell really made a point to say we need to trim down our running back rotation. Ches Malusi ended up leaving the program for his own medical reasons. Could just be that he knew he wasn't going to play. So now it's really Tawi Walker and Darian Dupree. That's kind of our two-man running back rotation. So that's been really helpful. And they're getting more carries. They're allowed the chance to kind of get in more of the game, which has been helpful. And we've had an emergence of a wide receiver, Vinny Anthony, who we always knew was one of our better outside threats, but he's really kind of like taken the reins as the top receiver. He's taken it away from Will Pauling, who hasn't had the greatest year. But yeah, he's a guy that can stretch the ball vertically and really, make an impact on the field. That's something that Badger fans have been calling for too long. We needed to stretch the field. We needed to throw the ball deep. Vinny Anthony gives us that deep threat. Don't always have the best quarterback to get there, but it's at least it's moving, and we're okay offensively against, frankly, worse defenses. We play a great defense, as you saw last week against Oregon. We can't really move the ball. Defensively, we've made a lot of improvements throughout the year. The middle part of our line is definitely the weakest, but we've got a guy named Elijah Hills who's played really well. Our secondary is definitely the strength of our defense. So the defense has kind of pulled together and actually done pretty well. And that's all of a sudden become a strength. I mean, no one thought we were going to allow Oregon to only score 16 points. And the fact that was the best defensive game we've played in a couple of years. Hopefully we can continue that this week. But there are some pieces that we can bring into the game that are strong suits, like the secondary, the running game, the offensive line, most definitely. But then there obviously are the other parts of it that make it a little more difficult to see a victory.
Yeah, and I guess like in my next question, because the feel in Huskerland is a lot of anxiety and not optimism. Let's just say that just a lot of pessimism due to another instance where we get to 5 wins, we lose to UCLA, and then USC had every opportunity to win that game last week and couldn't get it done again. How's the overall feel coming into this game for the Wisconsin fan base? Are y'all feeling confident about it, or is it kind of one of those things where you understand like this is a process? We have a backup quarterback. Like if we want to make a bowl game, of course, but what's the overall feel? Like, do y'all understand this is kind of like a longer term build, or are y'all in kind of panic mode like Husker fans?
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag, honestly. I think you've definitely got fans that are in a bit of panic mode. Obviously, the first 2 games of the season, we kind of underwhelmed, even though we won the games, and we got blown up by Alabama, which is to be expected to any team. And then we had our stretch where we went to USC and lost. And we had a stretch where we actually looked like we were okay. Now, we were playing Rutgers, Northwestern, and Purdue in that stretch. So, and a lot of teams can look good. And we knew that our schedule was rough. We had to play Alabama, USC, Penn State, Iowa, Oregon. That 3-game stretch is what really hurt Badger fans, especially losing 2 home games at night to Penn State and Oregon, both games that we really could have won had we just not gotten in our own way. The one thing that's really hurt the morale is the loss to Iowa. Losing 42-10 to our rival, one of our big rivals, is a huge blow to the confidence of fans. It's really one of the reasons that we now have lost our offensive coordinator. Phil Longo was fired last week, and that's because we've just been inept when it comes to the offense. So, the feeling right now is we need to get bowl eligible, and we need to get to 7 wins if we can, which is winning the next 2 games. They're, in our eyes, they're 2 winnable games. I'm not saying that the game in Lincoln's going to be very difficult.
Oh yeah, but 100%, it's got to be. I mean, it's a 50-50 game in my eyes.
And it's one of those things where if we can beat Nebraska, and then losing to Minnesota is never an option for us. We just that talked about something that will just destroy Badger fans' morale. So we got to win that one, and then at the end of the season, you can say, okay, 7-5. It wasn't the best, wasn't the worst, but we've got things to improve on. And ultimately, with a new offensive coordinator, we're not really sure what we're going to get next year. There's a lot of different talk about different guys that it could be. So there's excitement building for what can be next. Right now, though, we just got to finish this season as strong as we can and try to just get to 7 wins. We have a 22-year bowl streak. It's the 3rd longest in the country. That's something we're really proud of. And 22 consecutive winning seasons, like 7 wins is a number that really means something to us. And hopefully we can get there.
For sure. Yeah, that must be nice to have all those streaks, Can't relate over here. But with that, talking about the firing of Phil Longo, I feel like the fan base is kind of split on who to blame. I feel like half of them are saying Braden Locke, half of them are saying Phil Longo. Do you think it's just kind of a little bit of both? And I don't know if you can really fault Braden Locke. I know, he's supposed to be the backup coming in. I know he's had a turnover in every game. It just hasn't been consistent. And I understand the frustration. But do you think, Phil Longo held him back, or do you think it was just kind of just those two together just kind of was not necessarily ever going to work?
Yeah, obviously we'll never really know. I think that Longo, certainly with a better quarterback, it would have worked better, right? Like when we played the Northwestern, Rutgers, Purdue, that stretch, Phil Longo's offense looked incredible, and Braden Locke looked incredible. We did a show where we're like, holy crap, do we have a good quarterback now?
Right.
And now 3 weeks later, we're like, he sucks. So, I mean, it's just like, that's just the reality of who you're playing. So there's that piece of it. But at the end of the day, Braden Locke isn't the guy. I mean, he has a lot of faults, and sure, like there is a lot of blame that falls on him. But the concern is that 23 games into Longo's tenure, we really haven't seen creativity that we thought we would see, tenacity, aggressiveness, dynamism. We don't see any of that. In fact, all we really see are the same kinds of plays, not a lot of inventiveness, not a lot of adjustments being made. We run the same damn slant pattern. Like
sounds just like Marcus Satterfield.
Basically, and I know that's why you guys are upset with Marcus. I totally get it. It's just like, we were always waiting for this breakout game of we're going to finally see Longo's offense. It never happened. Yep. And the fact of the matter, it was never going to happen.
Yeah.
We've also gotten some information over the last few weeks that the relationship between Fickell and Longo was not in its best form. And that's just speculation, things people have heard. They weren't really on the same page. And if you have a head coach and an offensive coordinator not on the same page, you're asking for trouble.
Yeah.
You could see some things in press conferences. Longo would say stuff like, I'm here to please Fickell. And Fickell would say stuff like, we got to trim up the rotation. Like, we're playing too many people. It was just they weren't in sync.
Yeah.
So whether it was on Braden Locke or not, I don't want Longo there because he doesn't gel with our coach that we believe in, kind of like you guys believe in your coach. And, I think a change had to be made. Ultimately, though, no matter who you bring in, if you don't bring in a quarterback that can actually run the system that he wants to run, you're not going to be successful. So we really need to hone in on. We're hoping very close to landing a 25 guy that could be a big surprise. So hopefully we can make something happen there in the quarterback position. Well, we're going to need to go to the transfer portal regardless.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about matchup wise, talking about your offense and what what you've seen, but of course y'all don't know exactly what to expect this weekend. What are some of the things that you think Wisconsin's offense can take advantage of Nebraska's defense, or what are some of the things that you think Nebraska's defense can really do to hold Wisconsin's offense back. My biggest thing was I was thinking, I talked to you about it yesterday when I answered the question, was just try to, because the way Nebraska's defense has struggled this year is whenever teams have been able to run the ball. Indiana, they came out, Justice Ellison, first drive, just ripped off a 70-some-odd yard run. I said before that game, we got to stop the run because once our defense gets on its heels, I don't think we're playing as good team defense this year. So I would, my thing was to stop the run and try to force Braden Locke into a pocket passer and try to get pressure after him. What do you think are the keys in terms of that matchup, y'all's offense versus our defense?
Yeah, it was really interesting, the thing that you mentioned to me yesterday about your secondary potentially not being the greatest part of your team. And I think that's got to be something we can take advantage of. Ultimately, a Wisconsin win always means we're running the ball well. That has to happen. We've got a great offensive line. They're fantastic. 5 guys been healthy all year. We've got a lot of future NFL players on that line. It's really going to be about, we're not really sure what we're going to see from a scheme perspective running the ball tomorrow. We're not really sure. Hopefully we see some different things like some jet sweeps and some off tackle runs. Between the tackles, we've had a little bit of problem, and I know that's the strength of your defensive line, if I'm not mistaken, is the interior. So that's a matchup that we have what's going to be very interesting. Where we expect to gain some edge on you is on the edges, actually, with a guy like Darian Dupree, who's our backup. He is really good in space, swing patterns, off tackle runs, toss plays. That I'm hoping we can get our guys like him and Treshka Kahuna, who's our freshman slot wide receiver, into space, because then you're going to be able to make some things happen against a Nebraska defense that hasn't always been that great. The problem is what we want to do is take advantage of your secondary, but we don't have the quarterback to really do it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the problem. He's a bit of turnover happy. Now, I do think you're going to see some bombs to Vinny Anthony. That happens in every game. Every single game we've played since he's been in there, he's thrown a pass like that. It's going to happen tomorrow. Hopefully we can connect on it. But ultimately, it starts and ends with, can we run the ball? And Tawi Walker and Darian Dupree have had some semi-okay games. They've had some good games. But honestly, against teams that are more in that tier of where you guys are, we should be able to run the ball, and we expect to. Yeah. We couldn't run it against Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, but Iowa and Oregon, but that's really not to be expected. I mean, those are really good defenses which Nebraska nor Wisconsin are that. So I'm hoping that we can do that. And then if we can get the run game established, then of course bring in some play action, use Vinny Anthony deep threats, Will Pauling, Treshka Kahuna, and really kind of stretch the field the way that we like to do. But if we can't run between the tackles, and if we're not calling the plays to the outside, it's going to be problematic.
For sure. And let's just go ahead and flip it over to the other side. Y'all's defense had a great performance against Oregon, probably feeling a lot of confidence out of that. What were some of the things that you think gave Oregon's problems in that game that you were able to do?
It's been really interesting to watch. There are games where I feel like we can't tackle anybody. There's games where we feel like we cannot get pressure. There's games where you look at our stats, you're like half a tackle for law. I mean, just like there's no disruption. We got disruption last week, which is something that I think part of it, honestly, was Oregon didn't play that well. Let's be honest. Like they didn't have their best game. They flew across the country. Like they were kind of beat up. I don't know if they weren't just ready for the atmosphere. It was very cold. So there's that element of it, but especially the interior guys, Elijah Hills, we have a middle linebacker, Christian Allegro, who's a sophomore, who we really like. He's super athletic, very aggressive, high, motor, good speed. We're getting better players on the field. We're giving, if you look at our snap counts, I mean, some of the guys you saw at the beginning are now changing into some of the newer guys, and guys can be more disruptive. We have a quarterback, Xavier Lucas, who made a great play against Dylan Gabriel. And so ultimately, I think it was just our execution was better last week, truthfully. And the other thing is that Mike Tressler, our defensive coordinator, we've given him a lot of flack over the weeks about not drawing up pressures, blitzes, stunts, things like that. He did some of that last week. He confused Dylan Gabriel. It's kind of weird to think that our defense is going to confuse Dylan Gabriel, but we did. And so now, of course, we're just about, that needs to continue, because if you're going to go after Dylan Gabriel, you need to go after Dylan Raiola, even though obviously I know he's a talented quarterback. So that's going to be really interesting to see kind of whether or not we play more base, whether we kind of attack a bit more. I expect us to do that, just because I think, again, from what I've learned from you and what I've watched from Nebraska, I think, Dylan Raiola is a guy that's going to probably put the ball in harm's way if you can get to him. Doesn't have the best wide receivers, which is something that you mentioned to me, and the guy from the Common Fan podcast mentioned that as well. So I think that there is an advantage there if we can put some pressure on Raiola, which, look, he's an athlete. He's really good. You know, like, he's going to move the pocket. So I feel like there's definitely a risk in that, but ultimately I want to do that. I want to pressure him as much as we can. We don't have the best, like, just base defensive line. We usually run a 2-4-5 type system. We don't get a ton of pressure, but if the proper scheme is called and if we're doing different things, we can hopefully create that pressure, which I feel like we're going to need to do to get you guys tomorrow.
No, for sure. And you know, with that being said, but what Raiola struggled with this year is, like, you know, early on in the season, it felt like he was just very calm and comfortable in the pocket. And then, you know, as the Illinois game happened, the Rutgers game happened, the Illinois game was fine, but the Rutgers game, but between those two games, he took a lot of hits. And it just seemed like, you know, our offensive line and our offensive coordinator was putting him in terrible spots in terms of play calling. Yards were the routes, all the routes were 20+ yards down the field. So he's taking a lot of hits. So I feel like, you know, that pressure, he started to feel that pressure. And I think that's really what, you know, he starts seeing ghosts back there. He gets a little bit of happy feet. And, you know, last week he missed a read, you know, wide open read in the end zone. Jamal Banks was wide open in the back of the end zone. We end up, you know, checking it down and getting to 4th down. But yeah, so there is an element there that I think, like, as long as you keep him uncomfortable in the pocket and try to keep his feet, you know, shuffling, and you know, our QB coach says, you know, calm feet equal calm mind. And that's what's telling the story right now. His feet weren't calm over the last few weeks. He looked a little bit more comfortable last week, but yeah, that is part of the problem. Is you want to disrupt his rhythm for sure, because that's been, you know, shown to throw him off a little bit. Absolutely.
One of the things that I've noticed from you guys is that you're fairly balanced, right? I mean, your run pass percentages is, I think it's pretty much close to 50%. Mm-hmm. How has the run game been this year as far as effectiveness and being able to take some pressure off Raiola? I mean, I know you've got some good guys that you're only averaging 3.7, 3.8 yards per carry, though. You know, is the offensive line, is the running backs, what's the big issue, or how is the running game really?
It's the play caller. I mean, honestly, Marcus Satterfield, he 2 weeks ago, he came out in a press conference. This was right before he lost his job, mind you, and said he didn't know his yards per play, but he also said he is starting to learn in year 2 as an offensive coordinator in Nebraska that you have to establish the run to win in the Big Ten Conference. He said that 3 weeks ago. Like, wow. That's absurd to me. So our running back rotation really didn't make sense. There was no rhyme or reason. It seemed like we didn't really want to establish the run. It seemed like there was kind of our offense was random. There was no identity. We weren't a run first team. We weren't a pass first team. We just didn't know what we were going to be. And there was no adaptation over time. So, you know, part of what I feel like might help with the air raid here is, you know, with Daniel Holgorsen, you know, the wider splits, you know, between the line will allow for, you know, clear running lanes for our guys like our Emmett Johnsons to be able to get through into the second level easier and just be able to kind of dice their way through the second and third level. And then we have Dante Dowdle, who's kind of the bruiser. He's never going to run around you. He's going to try to jump over you or run through you. And so, like, I think it's just been a matter of they've been rotating these running backs way too much, and they haven't established one guy as a guy that's this guy's got the hot hand. Let's keep running it with him. It just seems like every time we get a rhythm, they take us. Marcus Satterfield will take us out of it by, you know, throwing some screen passes. Like all of a sudden we have no perimeter blocking. So it's one of those things. It's like, it didn't seem like there was a conscious effort to get the run game going effectively. It just seemed like he ran it because he felt he had to at times. And I'm hoping Dow with Holgorsen there, because it seems like Holgorsen is now starting to recognize, and he's calling out a lot of these issues, that he knows that there needs to be, even though he runs at air raid in West Virginia in 2016, he averaged over 200 yards per game running the ball. He understands he can balance out this air raid. And so I'm hoping that we'll see a little bit more of a efficient run game as opposed to just, you know, just running the ball randomly, so we can see kind of some more chunk yardages and stuff like that. But it's just something we haven't seen enough of a commitment to the run game to be able to kind of get really anything going. It's been our running backs, you know, a lot of the times they were missing their holes and stuff like that too, which is why I also think the air raid will help, you know, with those wider splits, making those more identifiable. But yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where I just think it's a conscious effort to really kind of play to the advantages. You know, if you feel like you got a way to move people out of the box, move them out of the box and try to run the ball. It just seemed like there was none of that going on. There was no creativity to it. And yes, very similar to kind of what you were talking about with y'all's offense. Just no
lack of creativity drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Nothing drives me more crazy than trying to do the same thing over and over and just not being creative. And I'll tell you, what you're talking about with Johnson and these guys and Dowdell, I think that's something that definitely concerns Badger fans, because look, when we lost to Iowa, they passed for 93 yards and they scored 42 points. They ran the ball all over us. Now, to be fair, we corrected that against Oregon. Right? We did not give Oregon a lot of yards on the ground at all.
Correct.
And we that was all execution. I don't know what happened after that Penn State game. I don't know if we didn't even show up. We didn't get off the bus when we went to Kinnick.
Probably like the Indiana game for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
I don't know if this is how it felt for you, but that Indiana game felt like it was just like every play that could break for them broke, and
100%.
every play that could go wrong for us went completely wrong. It just nothing worked, and it's just like everything just wasn't our day. Like, yeah, I feel like our team quit at halftime.
Yeah, I mean, it was ugly. So we're obviously hoping for a result a little bit closer to the Oregon game where we can actually stop the run. But that is something, if you guys can get very early on, establish that run with Johnson and Dowdell, that's their names, right? Yeah. That and between the tackles, right? Because again, the defensive tackles, that's not the strength of us. It's just we're not really stout up front. We don't have that Keanu Benton guy who's now playing for the Steelers that was the core, the sort of the anchor of our line for so long. You know, we have a long history of great linebackers and great interior defenders, but we don't have that right now. That is a place where we can be had. And it means that our safeties like Hunter Wooler and Preston Zachman have to come up and make a lot of plays, which they're able to do. Then, of course, that can open up lanes for Dylan Raiola. So
for sure.
Hopefully we can stop the run. If we can stop the run early, it's going to be a very, indicative situation for us. Kind of like when we played the Rutgers and Northwestern games, we did that. We shut them down early, and it was very indicative of how the game was going to go. So hopefully that's what we see tomorrow.
Yeah. And, I'm trying to be respectful of your time, but before we go to kind of I'm going to ask Coach a couple more questions on your percentage chance you think to win and maybe your score prediction. But do you have anything else before we move on to that part of it?
No, I mean, I think that it's going to be a great, exciting game. I think one of the things that's been a bit of a strength for us is special teams as well. I don't really know how Nebraska's special teams are. I think you may have said that their kicking game isn't that strong.
No, our field goal game has been horrible.
And ours has been pretty good, especially our punter. Boy, Atticus Bertram's has been we kind of joke every week that he's been our best weapon. He's like the old Iowa team.
Our punter is too. Bushini, yeah.
I mean, it's nice to have that. Yeah. So that'll be interesting. I think one of the things that's going to be very key in this game is turnovers, right? I mean, we know this. Yes. We know that Raiola can do it. We know that Locke can do it. And what I said yesterday on our show is, like, if we give the ball to Nebraska in plus territory, we're screwed. Like, you can't give them short fields because, as you've said, like Nebraska's ability to put up points has been a bit of an issue. Red zone offense has been a bit of an issue. Well, if you give them the ball on the 30-yard line, you're in trouble, and that is my biggest fear. I've looked at some of the stats. Is it Ty Johnson? Is that the Robinson? What's the
Ty Robinson?
Ty Robinson. 6 sacks, right? I think.
Yeah.
I mean, that 6'6", 310, I believe. Like, holy cow! If he gets a hand on Locke, I'm telling you, Locke's probably dropping the ball. So like, we really need to protect him
because he punched one out last week. Ty Robinson did. Yeah,
and that is my biggest concern. Is like if Locke turns the ball over and gives short fields to Nebraska, I think that's really where things can turn. I'm hoping that just not to be disrespectful, but the level of opponent we're playing tomorrow is not of Oregon. Penn State,
you're not going to hurt. No, you're not going to disrespect us. Trust me. We talk the worst about ourselves than anybody else could.
Right. So same. So I expect it to be better in that regard, but turnovers are going to tell the story here. Whoever wins the turnover margin is winning this game. I think that's as clear as it gets.
Yeah, because this is going to be it's going to be ugly at times, but it's definitely going to come down to probably one score in a very close game and what will probably be somewhat of a dogfight, in my opinion. So, with that being said, though, what's your confidence level? Would you say percentage? Let's say just go with percentage first.
Yeah, I'd say 60% right now. Confidence. I mean, I think we did these confidence ratings a few weeks ago, and I was more like 80% after we saw the Nebraska Indiana game. Everyone was like, okay, it's fine. But
Yep.
at the end of the day, we're not playing that well either, right? And we
Yes.
just got trucked by Iowa a couple weeks ago. So I would still say 60% just because of the way our defense played last week
Yeah.
against Oregon. Really kind of, and I think there's a lot to build off of. You know, that unit is going to be hungry. I mean,
Oh yeah.
and frankly, on the road, we've actually played okay this year. We should have beat USC on the road early in the season. We did win a couple other Big Ten road games. So I do feel, other than the Iowa game, that was a disaster. I think that, we should hopefully come into Lincoln really locked in and ready to build off of what we saw last week. So 60% for me.
I'm going to go with 55 just because I can't feel like I told you. You said, what is the thing that worries me the most? We're Nebraska. That's what worries me the most is like.
And when you play Wisconsin, doesn't go well.
Exactly. And you can't I can't feel too confident about anything right now after I was feeling pretty confident about a UCLA game too. So, score prediction. I'm going to go with, I'm going to say 21-17 Nebraska.
Okay. I'm going 27-20. I think that 27-20 Badgers. I think both teams are going to kick some field goals just because I think both offenses tend to lose steam when they get in the red zone. So
if we can make
expect to be more some field goal side. So now 27 might be a little high, but I think ultimately neither of our defenses are great. We're not gonna be as effective as last week against Oregon. Yeah. That was a bit of an anomaly. You guys are going to find a way to run the ball surely on us a little bit. But yeah, I still think we win 27-20. Let's hope so, man, because I don't know that I could take another Badgers loss, but
I can't take another Husker loss. So hey, this is going to be an interesting game for sure. This is probably like the least interesting, most interesting game of the weekend, just because our fans are ready to just kind of end it all at this point.
I saw a stat, and I hate to bring this up, but it was like, but it's interesting. It's just kind of like it tells people where we're at. Like, yeah. But Nebraska's lost like 9 straight games when their bowl eligibility has been on the line. I mean, holy cow!
Because we got to 5 wins pretty early on last year, and then I think lost 4 straight, and then got to 5 wins fairly early on this year, and have lost a few straight. So yeah, it's every single time it feels like it's like we're right there. We get right there, we get some confidence, and it's just like, and it's gone.
Well, the best part about it is one of us is going to win this game.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to win, and somebody's going to have 6 wins and then hopefully have a chance at 7. You guys play Iowa at the end, so that's going to be tough, but we play Minnesota. We can definitely do it. So we'll see.
For sure. Well, all right, man. I appreciate you so much for taking the time, man. It's always a good time talking with you. Do you want to tell people one last time where they can find you? And also, if you want to see his preview, I'll have the link in the description as well.
Yeah, so I'm at Rajeev Badgers on Twitter, the Bucky Report podcast, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Check us out. And then after the game, if Nebraska wins and you guys want to hear Badgers, sitting there and be sad, you can listen to Locked On Badgers. We're always there for our post-game reaction pod. So yeah, if you lose, I don't think you're going to want to check it out. But if you win, we always have a lot of visiting fans who come in when we lose.
For sure. Yeah. You know how that goes. So, all right, man. Well, thank you again. And appreciate everybody for checking it out. If you made it this far, please drop a like, comment on the video. Let me know your thoughts. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.